We are back, and we have the Granny National sitting on all four of its own wheels. Basically a roller right now. I've got the front subframe fully mounted, got the spring perches made in the rear, got a lot of the mounting stuff done for the rear. We'll take a quick look at all this stuff, and then we'll talk about what we're gonna do next. Overall, it's pretty stout. Maybe put a little bit too much camber in there, but I should be able to resolve that with some camber bolts. You can't really see it on camera, but these brackets here are just awesome. I'm gonna box this in still, but you can see these little standoffs, and it's just a super solid setup. Now, the engine is still gonna sit pretty far back, and I'm going to try to take as little of the firewall out as possible, so that way I can leave most of this bump in here, at least as much as I can, for me to be able to have as much room as possible on the other side of it for an HVAC box, so we can have that heat and AC. Now, the thing that sucks about a 3800 is the mounting points for motor mounts is way up on the front side of the engine. So I'm gonna have to get kind of creative with how I do my mounts, and then I'm probably gonna have to make a custom oil pan with a custom pickup tube to clear that subframe and steering rack. So we're gonna take a few measurements off of this thing, and then we will try to see if we can get the firewall cut and at least set it in there and start working on our mounts. With just taking out where these pink lines are, which is basically in line with these little covers right here for the cage nut for the original subframe. So we'll start here, it'll be a little bit narrow, and then we'll kind of work our way out from there. But that's basically the minimum that we need to be able to fit the bell housing area within the firewall. So let me get this chopped out real quick. Luckily that whole piece just gets removed, and then we can modify that later. There we go. I just did kind of a sloppy cut instead of getting up real tight up against here. So again, we're only cutting out the bare minimum. And I am absolutely burning up right now. But now we have to figure out how far back that transmission is going to go, because this engine's still going to sit relatively far back in the engine bay. But yeah, we're getting there. Now what we'll do in here is go from where we cut and taper it back more or less to the front of the kind of seat support bars here, and get this whole center section out of here. Now this is like multi-layered through here, and there's a lot to cut through, so it'd be kind of challenging, but you know, we've done it before, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. I'm gonna set up the laser and get this all lined up, and then take out yet another chunk. And once this happens, we really can't be putting too much stress on this area of the car, because we're more or less relying on this big bar across the top here and that subframe to keep the thing from flexing a whole lot. I could weld a bar in here, but having done this 3 times, well, this will be the 3rd time, I don't really see it being necessary. So we'll get this chopped out, and then that should give us the room that we need for the transmission to sit in here. got pretty much all that cut out. Still a little bit more that we got to do back here, and then obviously that whole rest of that tunnel's got to be taken out. But man, I'm absolutely burning up, like covered in sweat. But there's 3 separate layers. You see this is the bottom one right here, and then you've got the second layer, and then this is a part of the, well, it's like this layer, this little piece, this layer, this layer. It's almost like 4 layers right there. So there's a lot of structure that gets lost in there. So again, we cannot really sit or put too much stress on this area until we get this all tidied up. So now that we have the rough cut in the floor and firewall, I need to get the 4L60 mated up to the 3800. And then we got to pull the pan off of that thing, and we'll start getting it positioned in the engine bay. I'm probably going to have to cut just a little bit more off this area here, pretty much back to the seat support area, because right around this area is where I'm going to put the plate that is going to hold the cross member, and that'll work in combination with the floor, this brace, and the tunnel itself for the actual structure of the cross member. So that way we're not doing anything crazy going all the way across the car. And then again, once we start positioning the engine, we'll trim things as we need it. So let me get this thing mated up to this, and then we'll start putting it in the car. All right, I've got it mostly where I want it. I did have to cut the floor a lot more than what I wanted to. It should be all right. You'll have a little bit of, you have to put your legs kind of off to the side, but these cars aren't made for a rear-wheel drive configuration. This wasn't designed for all this. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, why don't you just lower the transmission and have that pan area below the floor pan? Well, reason being, because when we get down here, I want the bottom of this pan to kind of be in line with these rails here, right? So if you look, it's fairly close. I don't want this hanging down too far. So on a rear-wheel drive configured car, the floor pan would actually be a little bit higher up in this section to accommodate for that. I'm pretty thrilled about this. I mean, it looks awesome. So again, this looks kind of goofy, almost like the engine is like way too far back because you've got this massive amount of space in the engine bay. But that also goes back to the whole thing that this body isn't made for a rear-wheel drive configuration. So in order for that engine to be positioned correctly relative to the subframe, it has to sit back that far, because you can see where the center line of the wheels are and where the engine's sitting. So this actually keeps the weight kind of on the wheels and behind them rather than hanging too far forward, because if we had this thing way up here, then we'd be pretty nose heavy. It kind of sucks too. I had to take a little bit more out of the firewall. We're just continuously losing space over here for the HVAC, but I'm hoping something out of a Miata or something might work. Just any small car. If you guys know of any cars that have a really small HVAC box, let me know down in the comments so I can check that out. But that's pretty much it. Definitely have to make some sort of custom pan. Still gonna have issues with the motor mounts themselves as far as getting them connected to the block. I'm gonna have to come up with something kind of tricky, maybe using these front bolt holes or even these little side pieces here. But I don't know. We'll just see how it goes when we get there. But let me finagle this around a little bit more, and then we will get to work on doing something with these mounts. All right, we have the cherry picker over here and a 3800 bolted in here. I went ahead and made these little upright pieces that go up to support this, because without them this whole thing would sag, and I really wanted to get this thing sitting on there. They're just tacked in for now, so they got to be welded the rest of the way. But as you can see, everything is looking kosher and in position. Even the transmission is lined up about where we want it. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to work on this transmission cross member off camera, so that way the next thing that we can focus on is getting this big hole in the firewall and the transmission tunnel sorted out. And then once that's done, we'll move on to getting the rest of this done. So I'm going to leave you guys a little food for thought, just like the last video. And this kind of stems from some comments that I've seen of a post that I made about Suzy Q, the Grand Prix, where people are, again, calling the car a GTO. How original, right? And it doesn't really bother me so much anymore, but it almost disappoints me that we live in a world where instead of celebrating somebody's accomplishments and the things that they've achieved, they try to downplay them. It's almost like saying, hey, all that work that you did, it wasn't worth it because you could have just went out and bought this car that was already built. And they're not considering the fact that I had learned so much from that car that it makes me able to do this right here. And there are things that are done on this car that are improvements over the last one. And the one after this is going to have plenty of improvements because of this one. So what I'm going to tell you guys is, and you can take it or leave it, is one simple thing. Today's accomplishments are what allows tomorrow's opportunity. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen a year from now or even 5 years from now. And you need to apply that to both the positives and the negatives in your life, okay? And remember that everything has an equal and opposite reaction. For every action is an equal opposite reaction, okay? This action of building this car will have the reaction of giving me more experience to continue building and continue to get better and better, okay? So we've already covered not letting people on the internet bother you on the last video, but on this video, I'm gonna tell you that you really gotta get after it, and you gotta start putting those accomplishments under your belt, because there's crazy dudes out here that are making Buick Regals rear wheel drive, okay? So you're capable of so much if you just set your mind to it, okay? Don't give up, don't lose your inspiration, and continue to keep on building, right? The whole basis of this channel, I've said this a lot, is that anything is possible, regardless of what anybody says. So I'm gonna leave it right there. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.